Well, she found out that there was a group of parents who were going to have a protest. And they were like,
YouTube is now live.
do what we have to do.
And all of your microphones are on?
Well,
Yes, is now.
Squeaky. All right. Welcome to our September 1st, 2020 work session. It is Tuesday. It's 5:30 p.m. We'd like to have an opening prayer or invocation if there's anybody willing to offer that.
I will.
Thank you, Betsy.
Father in heaven, we are thankful for this beautiful day, which we are able to meet and discuss city issues and to learn how we can best and better serve the residents of our community. We pray for them, Father, that they may be protected, that they may do what they can to protect their health and use wisdom and good judgment. We ask a blessing on the food of which we are partaking, that it might strengthen and nourish our bodies and our minds and help us think clearly and make the best decisions that we are able to. And we are thankful for this nation and the freedoms and liberties that we enjoy. Please help us to do what we can to protect them and guard them. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Betsy. All right. First item on the agenda, training video, National Incident Management System. NIMS.
Might be the only way.
Get that started here. And okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. We typically in our work meetings start off with training, and on the annual basis, we like to go over everything from grammar requests to Open Public Meetings Act to tonight's discussion, which is emergency management and an annual training and overview, and basically an invitation to you, our council, to take it to the next level, should you so choose, to become fully certified, NIMS certified. So when I started to look at the training videos that we could share with the council, it became very apparent that you actually need to log in individually to be able to go through and become certified so that you can receive those certifications and pass the quizzes and all that type of thing that would be required of that. So the videos that I'm sharing tonight is just snippets of different aspects of emergency management training and how they may relate to you, and figured that we would have a little bit of a discussion on that. So we'll start off by talking about what is NIMS and what is ICS. The National Incident Management System and the Incident Command System are both administered through FEMA. And basically it is a way for us, those of us who are on the front lines, to communicate one with another and be able to respond to incidents no matter the scale of the incident. Whether it's just one officer responding to an incident on the side of the road and maybe needs to pull in some additional resources, or if it's a full-on forest fire on a mountainside and we're bringing in national resources and everything in between. And so as an incident becomes larger and larger and more positions are added so that you can maintain this proper span of control, roles become more defined. And your roles as policy leaders are to, one, establish policy in the event of an emergency, and two, to establish funding to help us pay for and potentially be reimbursed for any incidents that may take place. So the five videos that we're going to show tonight is just snippets of different aspects. But the first is the 4 phases of emergency management, an overview of the Incident Command System, Emergency Operations Center, an overview of that, There is a more recent video on operations from an emergency management center, and this one is specifically showing the example from healthcare with COVID-19 and how the operations center is handling that. And then there is an example which kind of puts this all into perspective, and you can see the different roles that everyone plays for a public works emergency. So we'll start with that, and feel free to interrupt. We can stop videos and ask questions at any point throughout.
Ben, I have a question
Okay.
before we start. Are these the same sections for that first certification?
No.
Are they different?
So the very first, and we'll go over that at the very end, what are the certifications that the council could get? But the very first one is ICS 100, which is an introduction to incident command system, the ICS. And that's just one component of a much larger system of communication, going from small scale to large scale, unified command, that type of thing, and getting into what NIMS is, and it can go so far as to get online certifications for certain classes, or if you really want to become advanced or intermediate or advanced level, some classes that the council could hold to really help you to feel comfortable. And I share that from a personal perspective because in 2005, when I was in Washington County, we had a tremendous amount of water come in. We had just floods everywhere. And you can probably remember the Santa Clara River flooding and all of the houses falling into the rivers and all that type of thing. And it was just a huge natural disaster. Our community, our whole power supply for our community was held on by a track hoe that had kind of like pinchers, if you will, holding up the power, and another track hoe kind of shoring up that one. Eventually water went all around it, but that one track hoe held the power up because it lost its foundation and footing, and luckily we didn't lose power, and we would have lost it for an extended period of time. But that led to later in the year, all that water turned into brush, and that brush had brush fires. We had over 2,000 firefighters in our park, in our little community, and how our community responded to have the fires in the same year. Ultimately, FEMA invited representatives from Washington County to come to Anniston, Alabama, where we practiced and did different incident trainings. And we had everything from building inspectors and public works directors to mayors and councils and fire and police, all sorts of leaders, all from Washington County, that went and participated. And they gave us mock demonstrations where the mayor would get on and talk about issues, and then suddenly there would be another, a water tank would fail because of an earthquake, and how we all responded and that type of thing. It was a great experience. So.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Hi everyone, right now we're going to talk about the 4 phases of emergency management. These go in order from phases that they should be done in, from first to last. The first phase of emergency management is mitigation, and mitigation is identifying hazards and reducing the risks of those hazards occurring in communities. The next phase is preparedness. Preparedness is when you identify a hazard or an impending hazard that's coming and potentially hitting your community, are the actions taken to reduce the damage from that hazard occurring that we can't stop from happening. The next phase is response. Response is life safety actions that are taken after a disaster hits to reduce the death toll, the fatalities, the injuries, the loss to properties. And then lastly is recovery. And recovery is the act after response that is used to, or the phase after response that we partake in bringing people back to what they were pre-disaster. So like I said, mitigation, we're looking at different types of public education programs, hazard and vulnerability assessments, and improved infrastructure. All of these will reduce the risk of a hazard hitting and damaging our communities. And in preparedness, we're looking at emergency response plans, training and exercises, and sirens. These are all prior to events occurring, actions that we take to reduce the effects of a disaster. So if we see a hurricane coming and we know it's 48 hours out, we might have a siren system to warn people that a hurricane's coming, there's an impending storm, get to higher ground, evacuate. We also have public warning systems in larger cities. And then in response, response focuses on life safety, incident stabilization, and property preservation. So the way response works is the priorities are life safety, property preservation, and then incident stabilization. We also look at this at evacuation of shelters and mass care based on whatever disaster or hazard whatever disaster has struck the community. And then lastly, on recovery, this focuses on debris management, economic recovery, and health and social services. So many people might be displaced by a disaster, and if that's the case, we want to get them back into their communities and back to their regular lives so they can get back to work, get back to living their normal lives, and back into society. The biggest part about recovery is that we want communities to start thriving again. One of the big issues when it comes to disasters in communities, especially smaller communities, is that we're not able to, that potentially, if they can't recover, the community may die. And if the community dies, the residents have to go somewhere else to work, to live, and to be educated for their children, right? So in the recovery state, it's very important to have a strong recovery plan in order to really develop and really sustain the community after a disaster.
Okay, so that kind of gives you a little bit of an overview. We do everything we possibly can upfront to mitigate and plan for, anticipate what emergencies we might receive, we might endure, and then to put preparedness into place. And I think as a state, we're really good as far as being prepared, and we do that really well. Response is a little bit more challenging. I think actually areas back east where they have full-time fire and full-time departments that are a little bit more robust than here in Utah, their response is a little bit better. Our response is good, but our folks are spread very thin. We keep budgets very low and very tight. And so a lot of the response efforts we actually put onto citizen emergency response teams like CERT or on ecclesiastical organizations. We rely heavily on the community for response. We are one of the very, very best at getting out the first ambulance or the first fire truck. We're pretty good at getting out the second ambulance or the second fire truck. By the time we go number 3, we're spread thin. So that's just how it is. And then recovery takes a community to come together. Now this next video really shows the initial opening of ICS 100, and that Councilman Member Montoya is the one that I think that you went through and received certification on, and just kind of give an introductory of what the course looks like, how it shares the videos, and the type of things that it covers.
This course is intended as an awareness level course that will provide an introduction to the incident command system. The objective of this course is to provide basic knowledge about the incident command system so participants can apply what they've learned should you be called upon to play a role in an actual emergency or exercise. This course also serves as a prerequisite for taking higher levels of ICS training. If you encounter unfamiliar terminology in this course, click the glossary link up here in the Resources tab to find a basic definition. ICS stands for Incident Command System. What is an incident? In the context of this course, an incident is a natural or human-caused occurrence that requires a response in order to protect life, the environment, and property. An incident may start small, but quickly grow in scope, complexity, and severity. Consider the following scenario. A small forest fire starts in a provincial campground. Initially, the fire department from the nearest municipality responds. But what if they are unable to contain the fire and it spreads across a municipal boundary or even across provincial borders and threatens homes and lives? That type of incident escalation would call for a coordinated response by organizations and agencies from more than one jurisdiction. Municipal, provincial, and perhaps even federal agencies in extreme cases would need to work together to bring the situation under control. The safety, property, and assets of private organizations may also be affected, making their involvement necessary. All of this has the potential to present significant organizational and management challenges. For example, if more than one agency responds to the incident, who assumes overall command? How will decisions be made? Where do funds come from for buying needed equipment and supplies? Who is responsible for dealing with the media? These are only a few of the many complex issues that an incident will present. The solution for the challenges outlined in the scenario above is for agencies and organizations to coordinate their efforts using a standardized management system that uses common terminology, process, and defined roles. ICS is a management system framework that provides all of that and more. The Incident Command System, or ICS, is a globally recognized on-scene emergency management system. ICS provides a common organizational structure, allowing people from multiple agencies to collaborate effectively, even if they don't usually work together. ICS consists of procedures for managing personnel, facilities, equipment, and communications. It is designed to be used from the time an incident occurs until the requirement for management and operations no longer exists. Although other incident management systems are used in certain countries and jurisdictions, ICS is now recognized as the global standard for incident response. ICS is not limited to large disasters. It should be used for all emergencies. ICS is used daily throughout the world and has been used on many well-known large-scale emergencies and events, including the Fort McMurray fires in Alberta, Hurricane Andrew, FEMA, the Deepwater Horizon BP Macondo, the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympics, the Exxon Valdez marine disaster in 1989. What makes ICS the preferred choice by organizations both in the public and private sector? A number of unique features combine to set ICS apart. Let's go through them one at a time. Brad?
Okay, I'm not sure what happened to the video there, so that kind of was frozen the whole time, but that's ultimately really what it comes down to is, if you have an incident in your home, you're pretty much the one putting the fire out right off the bat, right? But if it gets beyond your control, then you start to call other elements in and getting the help that you need. Well, ultimately, you as elected leaders are responsible for the health, welfare, and safety of our community. And during an emergency, you'll often look to the mayor to be able to call the shots, if you will. But in all reality, the mayor should not be taking on that role. The mayor delegates that role to the incident commander, the person on scene, and relies heavily on the fire department and police department, public works department, and takes more of an administrative role. But there's all sorts of roles that expand as an incident expands. This next one, hopefully the video will work. This is more of the Emergency Operations
Both worlds
Center.
are different, but both worlds are working for the same goal.
We're all here for the same reasons initially, to help our community respond to whatever disaster has occurred.
Well, an incident command post is the place that the incident commander at the scene sets up his or her office, if you will.
That's the facility where command and control of operational resources is happening. The incident command post is really all about boots on the ground. That's where the action happens.
In general, the incident commander is responsible for everything that happens. You'd have to look at the incident, decide which jurisdictions are involved. Do you cross jurisdictions? Which disciplines are involved? Do you cross disciplines? An incident commander could be a single person, or you could have a unified command where you have several agencies involved.
Emergency Operations Center is the center that you're in today, and we do support and coordination for any large incident.
The support is there to provide stuff. If they need porta potties, if they need additional trucks, the incident commander will contact the Emergency Operations Center through his agency representative in the EOC and say, this is what I need, get it for me. And the EOC is then tasked with doing that.
The EOC is the beginning of the pipeline to get help. And so we make our requests for resources or logistical support. They start calling other counties, or if they need to, the state. If things are really problematic, once our request makes it to the state then, state EOC is the one who makes the request to the federal government for assistance.
Another kind of task that can take away from the responsibility of the incident commander is public information.
What we can do and what the EOC can provide, we've already got established relationships and distribution lists set up with our elected officials. We have relationships with the media. We have really all of our community members in mind during the response.
We're trying to do the absolute best we can for the most people we can with whatever resources are there, and both sides have to work together to make that happen.
I think that each of us are ultimately responsible and focused on our community. These are the people that we live and breathe for, and these are the people that we're taking care of.
So the first step in really having a good, effective incident response is being able to talk the same talk. Because let's say we called on Payson, or let's say we called on Nephi or other agencies to come and help us out. We need to be able to speak the same language. And that was the incident and the issue that we had in 9/11, when different fire departments, different agencies, police departments all came together, and there was ineffective communication. And with ineffective communications, lives are lost. So this is a more up-to-date version of the Emergency Operations Center, and this is an example during the COVID pandemic response, I believe.
A look at ICS for local government.
Oops, nope, oh, that's not it. Okay.
When an emergency occurs, it's too late to start planning a response. How do you plan for the unexpected? The first 48 hours is critical. Whether it's stopping a disease outbreak or preventing injury and death, you have to start to plan before the emergency occurs. And when it hits, act fast. The ability of your emergency response plan to sustain and succeed in any emergency is dependent on the strength and depth of its roots. A clearly defined chain of command and organizational structure, effective resource management, and advanced planning are important aspects of an emergency response. An incident management system, or IMS, is an internationally recognized model based on these principles. IMS provides the root structure needed to grow your emergency response plan and make it strong enough to withstand natural disasters, disease outbreaks, or any hazard. An Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, is the place from which you run your incident management system. The EOC is where you collect information, make decisions about priorities, and coordinate action and communication. EOCs can expand as the response unfolds and scale down as the emergency is under control. EOCs can be big or small, complex or simple, implemented just as effectively in rural as in urban settings. EOCs are necessary and achievable. Simply put, an EOC and any function within it is people, systems, and things. And of the three, the people and systems are the most important elements. For example, you have some people doing contact tracing, others to analyze the data that's collected. You have systems that detail how and when contact tracing is conducted and how the information is shared during staff meetings. And you have things such as trucks or cars that contact tracing staff use to get around, the personal protective gear they may wear when talking to people within a home, and the printers used to transmit the data back to the EOC. Incident management systems implemented as part of an emergency operations center follow an established structure. Following this structure, you can move quickly from planning to using your EOC, which is the key to being effective in your response. There are 5 basic steps to help get your EOC set up and ready to use. With that in mind, first, ensure that you have the laws and authorities in place to carry out public health emergency activities. Second, identify the personnel who represent the major functions for your area or across areas, including in particular rapid response teams, which can be deployed as needed to particular areas. These teams can be comprised of epidemiologists or disease surveillance specialists, laboratorians, and others, depending on the needs and scope of the mission. Third, identify a location, which may depend on the size of your response or the space you have available to you. And build out, whether it be from a warehouse or as simple as a storage cabin, whatever infrastructure is needed, such as computer networks and secure communication equipment, as well as transportation. Fourth, use existing training resources, such as the World Health Organization's Framework for Public Health Emergency Operations Centers, or trainers from CDC to develop standard operating procedures or systems to run your operation. Then, train on a routine basis, using exercises for various scenarios to keep skills and familiarity with systems routine, so that when the time comes to activate the EOC, staff can quickly move into action. Making use of the experiences and lessons learned to correct and customize plans and SOPs, filling gaps where needed. What an EOC does is make sure that all the various activities and stakeholders affected by outbreaks and emergencies work in sync. Making sure that information and data are shared efficiently and quickly in a coordinated manner. Communicating essential information to partners and stakeholders. Having an EOC structure in place as part of a country's incident management system provides an invaluable head start in heading off a public health disaster. For example, in Nigeria, the country was able to utilize resources devoted to another EOC, one focused on polio, and quickly bring together skilled public health personnel under an EOC devoted to the Ebola outbreak. This allowed teams and stakeholders to interface quickly and efficiently, preventing isolation of individual response elements. For example, staff conducting contact tracing upon identifying a symptomatic contact would call into the EOC, and a case management team, ambulance, and decontamination team would be deployed, getting the patient quickly into isolation while the contact tracing team moved to list new and existing contacts of the affected individual. This type of rapid response and coordinated action played a critical role in containing Ebola's spread, even among the densely populated areas of Nigeria. CDC is committed to providing training for those who want to establish an EOC. The investment can be minimal. The benefits are priceless.
So of course, this was focused in on the healthcare issues, and we didn't really, to be honest, think much of that as far as our emergency response plan as one of the items that we had planned or prepared for. You know, we planned for earthquakes, we planned for hazmat issues, those type of incidents within our community. An outbreak, that really does fall under the Emergency Operations Center of the county with the Utah County Department of Health under the guidance of the State Department of Health. But we are a frontline resource to prevent contamination, to pick up patients. And so we have to be a resource unto them to be able to provide those resources. And so we, again, need to talk the same talk. And so depending upon the severity of any particular case, I'll give a good example. In September 2014, we had a cloudburst come through. I think it was 2014. A cloudburst come through on our community and dump a whole heck of a lot of rain all at once. And it was before, it was 2013. September 13, because our new sewer treatment plant was coming online a month later. And at the time, we were still pumping all of our sewer to the sewer lagoons in our northwestern part of town. And there was active construction going on, which means open manholes. And so the water infiltrated that system, was being pumped up to the lagoons. It wasn't being handled by the new sewer treatment plant, which is the base of our topography. And consequently, it overwhelmed our capacity to pump that uphill. We had flooding all over our community. And as we were pumping, one lift station was overpowering another and actually creating a geyser halfway through as it was out shooting the facility. And at the time, our elected leaders got together and gathered. And for those who are on the council, you probably recall this. And immediately, the council started to get together and issue orders. And I specifically remember one council member issuing orders, we need to go do this, we need to go that. And that was not the role. In fact, we actually picked up and moved the council out of the fire area because it is as issues become more tense, and we need to rely on our training and our professionalism and those who are in the right positions at the right time, because the last thing we want to do is have some frontline firefighter get an order from his supervisor or her supervisor, and then a different order from their chief, and a different order from the city manager, and a different order from the mayor, and a different order from the council. What are they supposed to do? We have span of control, we have areas of responsibility, And at each level, we need to understand that. And so consequently, it's important for us to have that kind of training. This last example really just shows all the different roles as maybe it's a little bit to the extreme of the different roles that people take on, but it's being used as an example of a public works emergency. So it kind of gives you a different perspective.
A look at ICS for local government. Public works in action. An emergency can strike at any time and might require public works to collaborate with others on site. Just like fire, police, and ambulance, public works personnel will need to respond in a safe and coordinated manner. To do this effectively, these agencies need to use a consistent approach. The Incident Command System, or ICS, is used to command, control, clearly communicate, and coordinate emergency response. It's used around the world as an effective means for managing single and multi-agency incidents. ICS uses a number of key principles which guide response activities. The following modules highlight a few of these principles, including elements of safety and accountability, the 5 primary management functions, the process for assuming and transferring command, a flexible and expandable organization, and how incident action plans are implemented to provide a common direction. With ICS, any agency can effectively manage incidents that reach beyond the scope of their day-to-day work. ICS Module 1, the initial call-out. In this scenario, first responders are receiving reports of a sinkhole and flooding in the city of Denton. Fire and police respond to the scene. Fire assumes the role of incident commander to address immediate life safety issues. The incident commander is the person responsible for all aspects of an emergency and remains in charge until the situation is resolved. They bring personnel together in a systematic manner, ensuring safety, efficiency, and accountability. The incident commander is easily identified by their green vest. The incident commander requests that police set up roadblocks to keep vehicles and pedestrians out. After determining there are no immediate life safety issues, the incident commander contacts dispatch and requests support from Public Works. Public Works dispatches a supervisor and 4-person crew. When they arrive on scene, the supervisor reports to the incident commander for an incident briefing. This briefing includes basic information about the incident, the allocated resources, and the incident safety measures. Following the briefing, fire transfers command to Public Works, as it is determined that this is a Public Works incident and there are no life safety issues. The supervisor notifies dispatch about the transfer and puts on the green vest to clearly identify their new role as incident commander. The incident commander then transfers the incident command post to the Public Works truck. This is a safe location near the site where personnel can meet and make decisions. The incident commander sizes up the situation by evaluating the scene and identifying available resources. The incident commander decides to appoint a safety officer to oversee the safety of all personnel on scene. This person wears a red vest. The incident commander also appoints another person from Public Works as Operations Section Chief. This person is responsible for directing response activities at Glen. They wear an orange vest. This management team can now start to identify priorities and establish the action plan.
In the meantime, the water's still going everywhere.
ICS Module 2, establishing the incident action plan.
Shut the water
Several
off.
departments are responding to a water main rupture and sinkhole in Denton. The incident commander from Public Works has gathered the management team at the incident command post to conduct a meeting and develop the incident action plan. The incident action plan lists the current situation, incident objectives, and safety measures which guide response efforts. It outlines who is responsible for completing specific tasks for an operational period which is a specific period of time for addressing the objectives. The action plan is developed in a collaborative way during the planning process. To start, the incident commander decides to appoint a planning section chief who ensures that the action planning process occurs. This person wears a blue vest. The action planning process includes 1. Understanding the situation. 2. Establishing incident objectives. 3. Developing the plan. 4. Approving and disseminating the plan. 5. Executing the plan. And 6. Evaluating and revising the plan. During the process, all members of the management team offer their expertise. Together, they decide on the initial incident objectives, which may include shutting off the water supply, identifying other infrastructure that might be impacted, and dispatching a waterworks crew. As soon as all safety measures are in place, the incident commander gives formal approval of the incident action plan before it is disseminated and executed. ICS Module 3, Expanding the Response Efforts. Various personnel and departments are continuing to respond to a water main rupture and sinkhole in Denton. Led by Public Works, the management team has implemented an action plan, which includes shutting off the water supply, identifying other infrastructure that might be impacted, and dispatching a waterworks crew. The organizational structure can expand and contract based on additional resources and incident complexity. As the additional resources arrive, the operations section expands quickly to include 2 more crews, a traffic control team, and several pieces of heavy equipment. To ensure safety and accountability, effective span of control needs to be maintained in the organizational structure. This means limiting the number of resources that report to each supervisor. The span of control within ICS should be 3 to 7 people reporting to 1 supervisor. As resources arrive on site, there's an increasing need to provide effective support. To do this, the incident commander appoints a logistics section chief to manage resources such as supplies, equipment, and food. This person wears a yellow vest. In large, complex events, a finance and administration section chief may be assigned to manage finances on site. This person would wear a gray vest. As response efforts grow in size, there's an even greater need for personnel accountability. To support this, the safety officer ensures check-in procedures are in place to account for the well-being of all personnel. In all incidents, the first priority should always be the safety of first responders. As the incident unfolds, the incident commander regularly brings the management team together at the incident command post. They review progress, revise incident objectives, and create new incident action plans each operational period until the incident is resolved. Once the sinkhole is stabilized and corrective measures are well underway, regular day-to-day functions will be assigned to resolve remaining actions. As the incident commander concludes the active response efforts, they will need to account for all personnel. As part of these demobilization efforts, all personnel should be informed of future directions and accountabilities.
Okay, so that was an extreme example. Obviously, you'd want to shut off the water. But it is really important to understand the need to follow a methodology, a plan for attacking whatever incident might be out there. Because, for example, we have, I'm going to give a couple, this flooding that we had over by Summit Creek Irrigation Pond number 1 this past year. Who was in charge? Was it our emergency manager? Was it our city engineer? Was it our public works? Was it Summit Creek Irrigation? Having effective training up front helps us to talk the talk, walk the walk, and it brings all resources to bear. For example, down in southern Utah, one of the things that we ran into right off the bat was keeping track of all the costs that were incurred because we needed to have immediate rapid response. And that meant beyond the capability of our public works crew. And so we have brought on some local contractors, and they started using their equipment, putting their equipment on the line and using their gas and their resources. How do we account for that? How do we seek for funding for reimbursement? There's so many aspects and ways to look at it. But being able to be well-trained helps us to make sure that we have a safe and protected citizenry and that we're effective and professional in all that we do. So with that, I will invite you, I guess, if you are so interested, to be able to take some of these courses. The first one, Introduction to Incident Command, is online. So is ICS, Single Resources and Initial Accident Incidents. ICS 700 and 800 get into the National Incident Management System, an introduction, and a national response framework. And then there's two that are more intensive classes where you actually get in and put on different hats and different roles and responsibilities and really get ingrained into filling out the right reports and everything that you might need to do to handle it. But why? Why would this be important? Well, it's because you want to be prepared, have so good emergency preparedness. You want to have clearly defined roles and responsibilities so you know who to report to and everything is covered and nothing is falling through the cracks. You want to have good practice. And a good example of where we practiced this recently was at our Orchard Days. Even though it was much scaled down, this Orchard Days and last year in Orchard Days, we brought our incident command center, our RB out. We had an officer, we had a firefighter, we had a member of our leisure services crew, all in that incident command, basically giving out directions for different activities so that everything was well managed and well handled. And that was great because we also had an issue with lightning that year. And there was a direct connection with the mayor to determine if we were going to call it or not and shut down that that rodeo and or the fireworks. And luckily it went around us and we didn't have to do it, but there was a system in place that had we need to shut it down and had we needed to evacuate, it would have been handled properly and pre-planned. And then the last reason that we would want to do this is because if you are trained and if your staff is well trained, then it opens up the possibility of receiving grant funding from FEMA. So with that, any questions or discussion?
I have some questions. Is that okay, Mayor? Okay, so our emergency manager is Chris Lindquist.
Yep.
We have that. My light is blinking. Does that mean the battery's low?
I think you're working right now.
Okay. So Chris Lindquist is our emergency manager,
Correct.
right? And in the case of an emergency or an incident, is part of his role to determine who is the best person for the incident commander. Like if it's more of a public works deal or if it's more of a fire deal and it's not interagency, like with different communities. So would he be the one making that decision? Who is it that would decide who the incident commander is?
The answer is maybe.
Okay.
So as an emergency manager, he is working to prepare the community in advance. And he's also working to help manage the emergency after the fact. But he may not be the incident commander immediately. It is the first responder. So it's usually going to be that first officer, or if it's a public works call out, it'll be the first person on scene.
Okay.
Now, if that first person on scene suddenly deems it something that's beyond their span of control, they need to pull in other resources. They may transfer. So if for example, we have maybe a major water break and it's collapsed a road and because of a sinkhole and a car went in. Well, police is called out and so they're going to call fire and EMS to make sure that that the priority level of is life protected first and then property and then that's the stages. But they as soon as that has been transferred to fire to make sure that all life safety has been taken care of, then it will likely be transferred to public works. So the incident command may move and Chris may be on a cruise ship. So we can't rely solely on the fact that we can only have an emergency when he's here in town.
Right.
His
That
job is
makes
really to
sense.
help prepare us so that we can hit the ground running. And that even means a community emergency response team, a CERT team, and preparing members of our community to be able to come out. Because sometimes communication is lost, and the emergency manager on scene might be somebody in a local neighborhood that doesn't have any resources coming for the first 8 hours because roads are broken or bridges are out or whatever. So you
Right.
just don't know.
So also very similar, the forest fire 2 years ago, that quickly went from anything that we had anything to do with as far as incident management to a level 1 federal team, but we were supporting them. And so that's kind of an opposite direction that Ben's talking about, where we may have an incident command person initially, and then as the incident kind of calms down and starts getting dealt with, that can go to somebody else, or vice versa. It can go much higher than that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, next question. Do we have the colored vests?
We actually do have a bunch of supplies downstairs that are different levels, different colors and whatnot. CERT, for example, has their own color, green. And
Okay.
there's actually colors that we were planning on putting in our calendar last year that we didn't end up putting out there. If for example, you have somebody in your home, let's say there was an earthquake, somebody's,
Mhm.
if it's red, yellow, or green, based
Or
on
black.
if everyone's, or black, if
Yeah.
there's a death, right?
Okay.
Mhm.
And last one. If we don't already have plans for International People's Day this year, otherwise known or formally known as Columbus Day, where we usually get staff together and do a training and a service project, would it be possible, or is it not enough time for this year to put together maybe a mock scenario to help train staff and those in attendance for that, so that they have a preparatory experience?
We potentially could. We would probably want to provide training in advance of it instead of just having an emergency that day.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly that is a perfect lead in to turning the time over to Aaron, who's going to talk about potentially restoring certain aspects of the budget this year. And one of those is, do you want to have a Columbus Day activity?
Cool.
We have talked about different things though for our potential service and keynote speakers and whatnot. But
Okay, it's just an
we do
idea.
have
We
tabletop
could
exercises.
do it at another
Yep.
at another time and plan for it for another time.
Sure.
I love it when I can provide a good segue.
There you go. Okay, so before I do that, I need to get his email. You can't bounce back and forth. You have to do either one or the other.
Okay.
Then
Well,
only share one screen at a time.
the spreadsheet's just gonna be.
Okay, yeah, and we'll get that in just a minute. Okay. It's- Yeah.
All right, council, I'll try to go fairly quick. We don't have too much time. But I just kind of wanted to give a little bit of background to, for the public, because this is being televised on YouTube, for what we've done so far. So I've created a timeline. I guess I have to use the mouse. There we go. So February 8th, we had our budget retreat. You guys all remember well, we were in that room for 8 hours and we kind of hashed out the priorities of the city from projects and different items and vehicles and other expenditures. But then as we know, coronavirus came to town. We got the shutdown notice and we started to have some concerns over the budget. Then comes May 5th. That's when the city approved the tentative budget and our city manager came up with the idea of just doing a complete 15% reduction in our budget up front with potential for restorations of our budget if and when the revenues came in. And then the next point on the timeline is a question mark. This is a presentation to start thinking about the possibility of restoring some of that budget back in. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on the revenues that we were initially worried about. So I did some research into the revenue trends, and two revenue sources that I looked into were sales taxes and building permits. So sales taxes, initial projections from the Utah League of Cities and Towns and the Kevin C. Gardner Institute were that sales taxes would be down 15%. As the pandemic continued, Utah stayed pretty strong. Those were revised to 10%, and Utah stayed pretty strong, and that continued. And then the projections went down to 5%. That being said, if you take a look at our, if you take a look at our sales taxes, you'll notice this is a 5-year trend map. I know this is pretty busy, but it has a lot of good info. You'll notice there's a similar trend each year, but it just kind of gets bumped up. The space between each line represents a percentage increase. And now I'm going to show you, this is where COVID-19 shutdowns began. However, we did not feel any effects of COVID-19. And if you see, this is our latest figure in June. Sorry, this is ordered in fiscal year because I'm a finance manager.
This is sales tax for the state of Utah or sales tax for Santaquin?
For Santaquin City. These are our revenue sources. And so this is 2020, and you can see that we've been having a very good year. And even after COVID shutdowns, we still had tremendous percentage growth increase year over year. So this is simply put, just year over year, our sales taxes. And this, it should be noted, this June figure, which you see it fly up, that is only with a couple weeks of Macy's grocery store being open. So, and then with all those other businesses that are going to come into that business center, that figure is going to continue to go up. So these figures, I feel confident in saying, are really don't have a lot to do with our new grocery store, especially these. And then moving forward.
Aaron, may I ask a question about that just to make sure I understand?
Oh yeah,
what
for
the
sure.
space in between the lines represents?
Yeah.
So the percentages, I see where you have your red COVID-19 shutdowns at 14.9%, but then the next one, even though there's a dip, it says 19.9%. So am I understanding correctly that the difference is between the space between the blue line and the green line?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a year over year trend. Sorry, I shouldn't have included these last years. It was just to give you an idea that it's been going up consistently. And then in 2020, you can see that the space in between the lines is significantly larger than any other year. So we've had a great year for sales taxes, and we haven't really felt any impact from COVID-19. My next slide just kind of goes into why. You might be asking, why have we not felt any impact from sales taxes? I'm really kind of ripping off a lot what Ben said in our presentation on Friday, because he had a lot of good points. So people are shopping local, and there's a couple of reasons for that. We're a bedroom community, so there's been a lot of work from home, obviously because of COVID-19. And because of that, people are staying in the community just because they're already home, and we have a grocery store. There's a lot of amenities now. People just stay local and they shop local. Second, there's been an increase in home improvement projects based on just some data that we've seen. I had to throw that in there. And then the state of Utah economic conditions. Utah is, number one right now in terms of our economic condition. And these articles, these headlines I pulled are just from a few days ago. Everybody's trying to emulate, what is Utah doing? So we're in a pretty strong financial position, not just as a community, as a city, but also as a state. So that's another reason why we have not been impacted severely with a dip in sales taxes. The other revenue source that I want to talk about is building permits. I got a lot of research done about building permits today. I didn't know too much about how that process works, but Robin and who is a clerk in our planning department, as well as Ryan Harris, our city planner, were very kind to explain all of that to me. And they gave me some figures, and these actually match everything that Jason pulls for his reports in the city council meeting, the regular meeting. And this just kind of gives you an idea. The orange is 2019, the blue is 2020. You'll notice June, July, and August have had a significant increase in building permits. And they wanted me to note in this presentation that even though there is a dip in April and May, that was not because of COVID-19. It was simply because developers, they have to go and get their plats recorded to the Utah County Recorder's Office. Those are those giant plats that you are actually going to sign tonight. And that caused a backup in building permits, which then exploded into June. And estimates for this next month are anywhere between 50 and 65 building permits. So if you just compare that to what's been going on in the last year, it's hard to pull an exact number because building permits are based purely on square footage. So it's hard for me to forecast a number, but just based on the sheer number and volume of building permits coming through, I feel very confident saying that revenue source is fairly solid. So my revenue trends, what is my finding? It's that we are continuing to grow despite COVID-19. We have seen little to zero effects of COVID-19 on our concerned revenue streams. And that brings me into the recommendations, which I'm going to bring into a spreadsheet really quickly.
Say one thing.
Yeah.
Our building permits, we were planning on somewhere between 300 and 500 pre-COVID,
Originally.
but we cut it down to 150 post-COVID. 150, we're basically there right now. When you add the 10, the 37, the 59, and the 16 together, we've already hit, and we're only 2 months into the year. So with lots of building on our horizon.
Into the fiscal year.
Right. Into this week.
Yeah. The budget year. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben. And then, so budget restorations, our recommendations are, there's kind of two things that we put on hold. First was items that included personnel, anything related to personnel, vehicles, equipment, capital assets, that type of thing. And then projects, which we ranked. Recommendation is to restore selected items and then continue to hold projects except for the top ranked ones that have already been approved and that we're working on. And to clear that up, I'll pull up the spreadsheet. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Share screen. Oh, actually, got to open it first. Share screen.
Right. Awesome. Oh, do I just need to put this up there? There we go. Okay, awesome. Okay, so this darn thing. So some of the items that we recommend that you consider for the budget restorations. Oh, okay. Stop share. Got it. That's good to know. There we go. Awesome. Okay. For the folks at home. So COVID-19 items on hold. So green indicates items that have already been approved by the council. That includes a building inspector, and yellow indicates items that that me and Ben think you guys should take a look at in terms of restoring into the budget. That includes a full, is that FT? So that's a full-time fire chief.
Mm-hmm.
A merit increase up to 2%. Those were on hold. I think a COLA was built into the budget, but we had that merit increase on hold until we felt comfortable, and we believe that that's one of the first items that should be restored into the budget.
So the COLA is 1.8 and it's already in the budget, but it's still on hold for you to approve. A merit increase, just looking at the trends and whatnot, that's really discretionary at your level just to decide how much and if you're willing. But we are where people are evaluated on their anniversary month. those who have been evaluated in January, those who have evaluated in March, based on their performance, have not been given increases at this point. And that's okay, because if it's a freeze all year and that's what your determination is, and it should be, then that's fine. If you do want to start restoring stuff, then you could. But we were just looking at the trends of what other cities, and keeping it below 4% as a total possible seemed most appropriate. 1.8 for COLA would come in January. The 2% would be based on their merit. So our average would likely not be 2%, maybe closer to 1%, but it would be based on the performance of the employee. That's discretionary. It's up to you.
Yeah, and I'd like to refer to our budget book. In the letter to the mayor and council, Ben states that our priorities in COVID-19 are 1, maintain our debt service, and then number 2 is take care of our people. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we included that. Moving on, this moves to Councilmember Montoya's question about Columbus Day. We did recommend reinstating Columbus Day so we can continue to uphold that opportunity for training and for a service project. Conferences, we recommend council training be approved back into the budget, as well as the Utah City Managers Association conference, which is a great resource for our city administration. Programs, the calendar has been already approved and was brought to you by Penny I think it was 2 council meetings ago. Capital projects, these 2 have actually, these are going to be taken care of by CARES Act dollars. So these actually don't need to be worried about at this time. And then vehicles and equipment, we recommend that the police cars can be purchased to maintain the upkeep of that rotation of the police fleet. And then we already have a lease truck for the F-250 for the parks. And then we also recommend, instead of purchasing a new vehicle, we also do a lease for the new building inspector that would be coming into community development, excuse me. So that's really all we have in terms of items. Agenda management software, that's actually included. That's going to be, I'm going to present on that tonight. That's been included in the website. I prematurely put it green, but we'll see if you guys approve it. So. Didn't realize that. And then I'll let Ben talk a little bit more about the projects.
So as far as our projects are concerned, this is the ranking, the top 25 projects that the council, of the 50 that you evaluated during your budget planning session earlier in January. Now, with that, the blue is what the council voted for, the orange is what the department directors voted for, and the combination is what you see in the chart there. We sort of feel like that's the third tier of things that could be potentially reinstated, and it may be best to hold on most of those projects, at least for 2 more months, and slowly ease into it. We have plenty of projects that are currently underway, items that we're working on, and if we release things in about 2 months, that allows for wintertime planning for potential spring projects. But with that said, some of the projects that have been already approved that we are moving forward on are the new city hall and all the efforts that are going on there, the general plan update, and that was put out to bid and was evaluated by a group of council members, planning commissioners, and staff, and will come to your next city council meeting for your consideration. The salary market survey that was already conducted. The power generator is going to be done with CARES Act dollars, and then that starts getting into the next layer, the employee recruitment initiative. That's going to be no cost, but we want to kick that off with the police department taking the lead on that. And SCADA control panel upgrades, those are things that we can start to reinstate slowly over the next 2 months and bring that back to you in the future. But ultimately, we are planning for probably 4 to 6 budget amendments through the year instead of just 1 at the end of the year, so that you can have a hand in releasing funds as you deem appropriate. You are the ones that hold the purse strings of the city. We follow your lead in all things, and it's really up to you. But we're anticipating having a budget amendment prepared for you next meeting, and with that, it requires a public hearing. And because it necessitates the advertisement of 14 days in advance, we've already put it on for printing on the budget amendment, but what we should include or not include is up to you. And that's the point of maybe the last 3 to 5 minutes before you take a break before your regular meeting. So the time is yours. Any thoughts?
I agree. I think that reinstating those first 2 items would be my preference. And on the projects list, I'm seeing some other things farther down on the list that that are already underway also, like the North Center Street project and
242 is on there.
yeah, 242. The laundry room is going to be the decontamination room.
Part of CARES Act.
Money.
Mhm.
So some of those things I'm seeing are already underway with grant funding or CARES funding. And so I think if we put our focus on the other 2 items, that would be my vote.
And many of those things we have brought to you individually. We just haven't followed it up with an amendment to actually put those into the budget.
Yeah, I agree with what's been presented. I think this is a good plan, and let's hold off for a couple months on the other stuff. See how things play out.
Yeah, I think that's smart too. Wait a few months and reevaluate.
Okay, with that, we will take and put that together hopefully this week so that you can have a full week to review it prior to your council meeting, making any tweaks along the way via email or setting up individual appointments with us. And that, our work meeting is complete, and we turn the time to you.
All right, thank you. We'll wait for our next meeting to start. Thank you.
Okay, we'll shut down this meeting altogether on Zoom, and you can enjoy your break.
Thank you.